Fade to black near-death experiences. I faded to black, then woke somewhere else. On 42212 my heart stopped for 30 minutes. When my heart stopped, I felt like everything faded black. Then, all of a sudden, I woke up, but I was in a weird kind of purplish hazy type atmosphere with these beings. By just looking at them, one automatically knew their authority. You wouldn't question it. A person would feel drawn to them. So, 30 minutes felt like years in this place. Hundreds of years, if that makes sense. When I came back to life, I noticed I can now feel energy. I can read people's minds, to an extent, but not all the time. I also can feel movements in the environment when I close my eyes. Angels, guides. I left my body and met the guides. I left my body and flew to a place which was still, as if in the gravity of a first floor, before beginning an escalation into the gravity of life. It was a dark dimness. I talked with some beings that told me I was in a total risk, vital, transition. But I could ascend further still, and talk with someone who would decide if I would come back to my body or not. They said that the more I would ascend, there would be tremendous experiences as the possibility of coming back would decrease. It was probable that the same beings who were talking to me now would bring me back. It was like a train station where many beings chattered, and the colors of that dimension were brownish. Further away, there were grayish entities that were helped by guides in order to definitely leave their terrestrial life. There was not any true color besides the tones from black and brown to white. I saw people I knew on Earth who greeted me and continued their ascension. The guides told me I was in the threshold of death. I wondered if the persons who were dying and leaving their bodies in that moment knew where they were. The guides that accompanied me were kind, tactful, and very compliant, but impenetrable when certain questions were asked, and when they did, they answered with only a smile. The communication was by telepathy, and they knew instantly what I was thinking. But their answers were essential, concise, and certain. My guides were very calmed, unadorned, and with a tender sense of humor. It was then that the judgment began. Only I was the one who judged myself. Although they considered everything was evident, they allowed me to understand all the contradictions, actions, guilt and non-guilt, which I was feeling from the events of my life. They comforted me with precise words and calmed me. When I felt within myself a violent dialogue, justifying or blaming myself, they made me understand that it was all within the game of evolution, and that in the depth, the events of my life were in. Then I had the sensation that I was still in a foggy place near Earth. They told me I could take the decision to continue, but it was with a maximum risk for my physical body or life. Then, identifying myself with my Diego ego in the earthly realm, I accepted to continue since the guides were willing to accompany me. I worried because of the risks. Nevertheless, I accepted discreetly and humbly, although with the haughtiness of my Earth identity that wanted to have the experience. At the same time, my cosmic conscience allowed me to take the decision without panic. We then began to ascend at great speed without friction or effort, as when one is falling but instead ascending. I was in a state of reverberation, hearing a zooming sound and feeling a little dizzy as though in a car at great speed. The guides then seemed to have disappeared. In that moment, I understood my panic. I asked myself if I could resist the situation. Suddenly, with a great scandal of voices, I began to judge myself, to blame myself, to make decisions that belonged to their own code of existence. In that moment, everything was valid and excusable because it was understood that my own position was a small, humble position in an open game of evolution. If other proposals seemed more valid, they were humbly accepted because in the depth, there was no real guilt. After simultaneous cultural, legislative, and theological ideas exploded within me, the answer of the guides was in transcendence, and they pronounced that word with a smile. All the actions I considered so important were not so. Suddenly, my mind was allowed to rest in a quiet place in order to further ascend through a translucent tunnel with a light that seemed rather yellowish in opacity. Then I saw many beings, some ascending, some descending. 2 of them were known to me on the Earth realm, and I had not seen them for more than 20 years. I also met people unknown to me then, whom I met many years later in their bodies on the Earth realm. I asked one of the two persons I did know what he was doing there, and he told me he had had a very serious health problem and almost died. But the health problem had already been solved by the doctors. This is the reason he was going back to his body. Nevertheless, another friend who was a friend of my family for many years was leaving the Earth realm in a definite way. So was I told. Then came some guides to take the friend who had been ill back to Earth through a tubular shape in descent. I also observed other tubular shapes through which other souls were ascending, and among them the lady known to me and my family whose body had died. I inquired if the lady could go back, but they said her time was over and that she had definitely left her body. I felt the energy of the lady perturbed because she was confused, since she did not know she was dead, but I avoided meeting her. In that moment, my guide smiled. A different lap started in which the path was transparent, silent, and compliant. I felt the pleasure of having my conscience in total calm, together with the tender but distant company of the guides and other entities which I could not see. Suddenly I saw another path where all the dead members of my family appeared, among them my father. I then entered another stage with a moment of unconsciousness, but I recovered quickly. It was as though I would have crossed a purifying sauna, plunging into unconsciousness. But I soon noticed my consciousness was intact. I understood I had undertaken a risk of no return, and with repentance asked to come back because I knew I had already crossed the threshold of death. In that place, everything was brighter, although still not so much. I felt that only the identity of the affections I had for my family on Earth motivated me to come back to my body. I had then a slight but vital sensation of unrest and anguish, because I again understood I had traversed the threshold, so I asked my guides for an answer. They told me that the decision did not depend on them anymore, because we found ourselves in realms that were not of their reach. The answer made me feel dazzled. I asked them if they could keep on accompanying me because I wanted to have a dialogue with someone. They kindly accepted. I felt a nostalgic abandonment. I later had the sensation that they took my hand. We then shot ourselves out at a greatly cold, mentholated speed with acute cosmic sounds, pure and deep echoes, and the brilliance of a light so white, almost metallic, in which I felt us flying within an agreeable and refreshing wind. There were warm and exquisite odors, and suddenly a fog and a flat floor on which I saw the guides standing. From the white fog appeared a tremendously golden luminous figure, an androgynous being radiating a light as bright as the sun, but not hurting my sight. The figure was well delimited and began approaching me, becoming bigger in size as it came nearer, until I saw it a little bigger than myself. I was invaded by such a free satisfaction and wonder from seeing such a beautiful being that my mind was incapable of understanding. I almost lost conscience of myself, becoming one with him in that immense sensation. I was consoled by this compassionate being. In that runaway happiness, and with only a thread of conscience left, I turned towards my guides and whispered, "I deeply thank you for this immense experience, but I have to go back to the Earth realm to undertake unsatisfied small tasks." They answered that my life would go on, nevertheless just as tortuous as it had been, with only a few attainments. My life would only last for the time that was planned by destiny. Almost nothing of what was planned could be changed. In my great pride and haughtiness, I remained before this wonderful being that transcended me, of whom I felt a small part within me, and whose kind and definite answer I waited for. I turned again and looked at this being of light, directly, at a distance of about half a meter. He was a being of powerful, beautiful, and extraordinary energy, but I could not see his face. I had the feeling that if I did, it would be the equivalent of staying. Suddenly, the being made me feel an infinitely tender and noble embrace which is not possible to describe. I understood and thanked him because everything now was possible, even refusing to stay, for I had reasons to go back to Earth. In wonderment, I saw how he extended his right arm. Between us there was a dark abyss which I could pass by, jumping if I took his hand, except that no return would be possible. He told me I was free to take my own decision, an offer for which I looked at him thankfully and satisfied. Inclining my head, I breathed exquisite and refreshing air. The being of light, who looked at me with identification and condescendence, slowly descended his hand and went away, becoming ever smaller. He was a being of pure love, wisdom, light, and energy. The guides appeared then again, curious and kind, and were ready to take me back. I jumped and fell down at horrendous speed with the sensation of a fireball. I could not stand the friction and the unbearable noise. At the moment of maximum friction and sound, I accepted that I would die rather than to stand the sensation. But to my surprise, the guides told me telepathically with luminous words to relax because I soon would arrive. I then felt an explosion of white and red marmalade and traveled through it contrary to its flux. I finally fell with a dry and heavy fall, weighing tons, to see myself sitting on my bed with my eyes open and burning. I felt a deep pain near my heart, a pain almost unbearable, and a great difficulty to breathe. My body was rigid. My arms could not move. My feet were frozen, and I could not move them either. I could only allow threads of air to enter my lungs, or else they would hurt. I felt a little dizzy, and the pain in my chest was still intense. I was unconscious for a moment, but when I managed to move my waist, I closed my eyes and laid down. I was still hearing internal and external noises and zooming. The pain in my heart lasted with intensity for 1 hour and a half. I managed to go to the bathroom, feeling as tired as I ever had in my life. I then went back to bed and slept for 12 hours. When I woke up, I remembered the guides told me how my wife, my daughter, and myself would die. I saw my complete future and that of my daughter. I was told I would only remember fragments of it in certain moments. The guides told me my life would continue, as tortuous as it had been, but with small satisfactions. It had to be like that because it was programmed that way. And the purpose, although painful, was very constructive and evolutionary. I could not change it.
If you believe in science from beyond, like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. They watch, they guide, they listen.